right, all you glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely means a huge amount, and you're an absolute legend to us. All right, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going not too bad at all, Mark. How are you getting on?
Not bad, not bad. We missed another week. We're not going to dwell on it, Lewis. I do apologise to all the listeners. It was entirely my fault. Again, life has been problematic of late, Lewis, we will say, both in my personal life and in a working sense, but we're hopefully past the worst of it on both fronts.
That sounds quite dark. You are basically fine.
Oh no, I'm totally fine. To be clear to everyone, I am completely and utterly fine.
Just
life
busy.
is fine. It was just busy for a long time on both a working and personal front. It was just busy. I'm totally fine otherwise, though.
Yeah. I've just been sitting here waiting.
Anyway, Liz, that's plenty enough of my personal life. What have you been playing this week?
This week, Mark, I'm still basically continuing my playthrough of Bloodborne, which I won't dwell on for any length of time here, really. I've not played it a great deal in the past week. Similar to previous weeks, as I've said, I kind of keep finding my gaming time comes quite late at night, and I just don't really have the guts to go into it. And I also had one particularly frustrating loss to a boss on my first encounter with it. For anyone who's played the game, it's the Shadows of Yharnam. I don't think that's a spoiler enough to say. And I basically almost killed them and got killed with, like, I don't know, maybe 2 hits left to get on them, and I was so frustrated that I just put the game down for a couple of days. So I have to kind of refine that and get back into it. But you know, that's definitely still there. I'm still loving it. There's no problem there, just a wee bit of a break from that. And as I've been doing at the same time, I've continued on with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart a little bit. I'm probably just over halfway through the game, maybe a wee bit more than that actually now. I can't remember what I said the last time about it, but whatever I said then, I would imagine it exactly stands, because it doesn't feel like the game has changed a great deal other than it's given me some new weapons. But I'm enjoying it.
That's
fine.
most of the fun, though, is the kill new weapons,
It
right?
definitely is. I mean, it's very much a sort of arrive in an area, kill everything in that area, proceed to the next area. But I have encountered a few more of the slightly more open zones in this game, which I don't think, certainly the last Ratchet & Clank game I played didn't really have sections like that. It's sort of more exploratory maps with a bit more kind of collectibles and side missions and that kind of thing going on in it. So that was a nice thing to encounter, because I didn't really know that was in the game. And so yeah, I'm enjoying it fine. Like, I wouldn't put it in my top games of the year necessarily. Like, it's up there stylistically, it looks beautiful, graphically and sonically it's really good, but I'm not blown away by the story particularly, and the gameplay feels very much like Ratchet & Clank 2016 to me, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, I think I would probably agree with you there, to be honest with you. I mean, I really enjoyed that, I've got to say. It was just barrel loads of good, honest fun, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I really liked it for that, and I was really there for it at the time. Would I say that it's a Game of the Year contender? Probably not, but it's not a million miles away.
No.
Also, those Shadows of Yharnam, they are a bollock, so don't feel too bad about that.
I was so close. It's so frustrating when you almost kill them first try and then it goes wrong. But
yeah, because that's the time as well that you go into it again feeling really, really frustrated, and then you lose badly 4 times in a row, and then you're even more annoyed.
Absolutely, and it made me want to go and farm a wee bit, and I was like, oh no, just step away from this. Come back to it when you're in a different head state. So. What have you been playing, Mark?
Well, Lewis, I've been playing Nier Replicant Remake still. I've not had a massive amount of time to dedicate to it in like big chunk plays, but still plodding away with that, to be honest with you. I feel as though I've been playing it for a long time and I haven't really got anywhere, which is slightly frustrating because I am enjoying playing it. But man, if there was ever a game that needed a fast travel system, it is this game. Good lordy, I'm doing a lot of running around. But I am still enjoying it. Like, I do enjoy playing it. It's actually quite low intensity for a lot of the time. Like, it's not actually a particularly challenging game. The combat's quite fun as well, just to batter stuff. So I'm still enjoying that, still continuing through my playthrough. Because I haven't had so much time to play long spurts at a time, I've actually fallen weirdly back into playing Madden, a game which I wasn't very impressed with the first time I played it. And that continues to be true, despite the fact that I've now played 2 franchise seasons less. But it was just something that I could just just go in, I could play a couple of games and then get out, you know. I need to find something better than Madden to do that with, though, because every time I play it, I keep on thinking to myself, at some point during the playthrough, like, what are you doing? Why are you playing this? You idiot, you don't even like that this much. And I don't, like, I really don't like the game that much. It's just something that was already downloaded on my Xbox and it was just ready to go, and I was thinking, I'll just put that on for a bit, you know, and I've ended up playing 2 bloody franchise seasons with it now. But we're over that, hopefully. Pouring a lot of time into Nier. Honestly, I wanted to get past it because I want to start playing Metroid Dread and I want to start playing Deathloop very, very soon, because they are going to be in Game of the Year conversations, which is coming up very, very soon, Liz. Staggeringly, we are rapidly approaching Christmas.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's coming up very soon. So yeah, we need to get some of those top contenders played, definitely.
Definitely, man, definitely. Anyway, Liz, I think it is now time for the news. All right, news item number 1. PlayStation have had a state of play this week, and it was mostly focused on third-party games and largely smaller titles, to be honest, as we learned. It was only about 20 minutes, so we will just batter through them quickly just now. The first announcement was Deathverse Let It Die, which is a multiplayer survival game which looked like a sort of smaller scale battle royale game, perhaps based on melee combat. It was described as a PvPvE, and it is apparently in the Let It Die universe, which I believe is the same universe as No More Heroes, so I don't know how all that works, but yeah, there you go. And that is coming in spring 2022. The next game was We Are OFK, which is apparently a biopic game of an indie pop band called OFK. Now, Lewis, I cannot actually work out if this band actually is real, or if it's a sort of like guerrilla situation, or if it is a completely fake band for the purposes of this game, or what is really going on there. The band is verified on Spotify. I don't really know if that matters, but they only have one song. But the game in and of itself seems to be a sort of Telltale-esque story game, which, to be honest with you, it had like a cool art style and stuff, but yeah, let's go. Then after that was Bugsnax, The Isle of Big Snacks free DLC. This is coming in early 2022. And as a side note to this, the game now has trophies due to demands by Greg Miller, it seems, which is entirely bizarre. Then after that was Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. This was another gameplay trailer. I feel as if we see this game quite a lot, to be honest. The game really isn't for me, but it is coming on December the 16th, which I believe is a new date. I think that the game was supposed to be out earlier this year and has subsequently been pushed. Then after that list was one of the big announcements. Death's Door is coming to the PS4 and 5 and Switch, I have to add there as well, on November the 23rd. The game was previously released exclusively on Xbox and PC back in July when I played it, and it is still one of my favourite games of the year, to be honest with you. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, speaking of those Game of the Year contenders, that's definitely one that a lot of people back in the summer were saying was like a definite contender up there. You know, it was a bit of an indie darling in the summer, and I am really glad to see that it's coming to PlayStation. I'm actually not sure whether I'll play it on PlayStation or on Switch. Something about it feels like it belongs on the Switch, but I'm not traveling.
It's an indie game list. That's why it feels
well,
that
yeah,
way.
but just I think it's got that something sort of Zelda-ish about it as well. So
oh, totally, yeah. You can see the Zelda influence is heavy in this one.
But yeah, I'm definitely going to be playing this one way or another. Probably will be on PlayStation just because the portability of the Switch doesn't really matter right now in the same way that it once did, so I'll be playing it on my couch probably. But yeah, you were singing this game's praises. You told me repeatedly that I particularly would enjoy it, so I am definitely going to be playing this hopefully quite quickly after it launches.
Nice one, man. Yeah, you will enjoy this. If you don't enjoy this game, I will be stunned, frankly. Because to be honest with you, it's probably much more geared to your tastes than it is to mine, and I fucking loved it, so there you go. After that list was Kart Rider Drift. As the name might imply, this is a kart racer, very much in the vein of Mario Kart. It looked fine, to be honest, but it's going to be free to play, so get ready for all those microtransactions. There is a beta coming in December, if anyone is interested in that. After that was King of Fighters 15. We got to see the new fighter, who's called Dolores, and that there is an open beta coming next month. Lewis, we've always been quite into fighting games, and I think you more so than me even, but King of Fighters is just one that sort of passed us by a little bit. Have you got any interest in this?
I mean, you're definitely right there. It's a genre that I really enjoy, but in reality, we kind of always focus in on the same games because they're typically just long-running series, right? So you can just stick to one or two. But I thought this trailer was interesting. I've got to say, I was probably more excited about Guilty Gear Strive when it came out, and like a lot of people were talking about that in a way that I thought sounded really exciting. But it's hard to push yourself to try a new fighting game, I think, sometimes when you're so connected to the two or three that we do play quite regularly. So I would like to give it a shot, but I've definitely said that about other fighting games. I'm thinking specifically about Dragon Ball Z Fighters at the moment that I was pretty insistent I would play and never did, even though I don't like Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, Dragon Ball Z is awesome though, that's madness. Anyway, after that was First Class Trouble. This is a social deduction game, much in the vein of Among Us, but 3D. I guess that the success of games like this really come down to how many people are playing it. And as we will discuss later on, it is coming to PS Plus this month as well, which will obviously help get those players in. It looked pretty good for what it was, I've got to say. Definitely didn't look bad. And the game actually drops today, I believe, as we are recording this. After that was Star Ocean: The Divine Force. This is apparently the 25th anniversary of the Star Ocean series, which Square Enix have marked with the announcement of the latest game, which was a surprise to me, Lewis, because I had literally never heard of this series before.
Me either, Mac.
It very much looked like an anime Star Trek meets DMC style combat, but honestly, I'm going to be completely honest, this game looked pretty fucking bad. Like, it was doing nothing for me at all. There was a lot I didn't like, basically, and I think that if a game looks bad in the trailers, where you have total control over what people are actually seeing of your game, then it is a pretty bad sign for the game itself, but that is coming in 2022. And finally, Lewis, the game of the showcase was definitely Little Devil Inside. I'm very much still interested in this game, I have to say. However, I thought it was going to be a bit more Breath of the Wild-esque than it is probably turning out to be in reality. And we still don't have any more news on a release date beyond 2022. However, I do actually think that the game looks great. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty similar, to be honest. This was one of the trailers from the PS5 original showcase, the launch showcase that I thought...
Oh, the reveal showcase even. Sorry.
Yeah, that I thought was the most interesting. You know, it was one of the most interesting things that they showed at that point, stylistically kind of unlike anything that we'd seen before. And I don't think that this trailer quite lived up to that, but then obviously we were actually seeing the gameplay here in a way that we didn't really see properly in that original showcase, you know, with the heads-up displays and stuff like that on screen. I'm intrigued. I want to see more of it. I think it looks like a really fun, interesting little game. Story-wise, looks pretty sort of spooky and interesting in that way, but I wasn't totally blown away by this. I was maybe hoping for slightly more as well. Yeah, I kind of agree,
to be honest, yeah.
But, you know, as an indie game, I think it will hit its mark probably. It looks like it's going to fit into that category of, like, those interesting indies that everyone recommends you should play, you know?
Yeah, and there's always too many in any given year to get through.
Yeah. And you get around to them 4 years later.
Overall, Lewis, I have to say, it was a pretty underwhelming show in reality, wasn't it? It feels as though they really wanted to show off Little Devil Inside again and then went, right, what else can we throw in here to make this a full-length showcase, you know? And we didn't even get a date for Little Devil Inside, so I was a bit like, what was the point in this, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It seemed to lack purpose in that sense. I did see people on Twitter saying, couldn't this have just been a blog post in the way that PlayStation does? And I kind of agree with that to a certain extent. Like, there wasn't much here that elevated this beyond a fairly standard update from PlayStation. That said, if this is a precursor to us getting slightly more regular state of plays again, where they just do drop a bunch of different games and they might not always be for you, but it's 20 minutes and you don't lose anything, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, to be honest with you, do you know what PlayStation need? They need their Nindies or Idea Xbox version of a state of play. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They need their state of play to be like your Horizons, your God of Wars, stuff of that ilk, and then they need PlayStation Indies to be stuff like this, you know?
Definitely.
They should have two different names for these things like the other consoles do, you know, and I think that would set everyone's expectations correctly. You know?
Absolutely, yeah. And they have, interestingly, of late been calling their bigger events just PlayStation showcases. And I don't think they've really formalised that brand at all, but it does feel like they are moving towards something that's a wee bit different. So I think you're right, though. Make it clear, set expectations, get out ahead of it. But not that people were really running away with their expectations for this one, I don't think, because when you say it's 20 minutes long, it's never going to be...
And the big game from it was Little Devil Inside. I think that did set the expectations.
Yeah, and they'd announced that in advance as well. So hopefully people knew what to expect, but there was a lot of disappointment still.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's news item number 2. Sega and Microsoft have agreed a quote-unquote strategic alliance. It has been announced. Now, I think that this has been widely misreported, Luce, because what this isn't is a Sega and Xbox partnership. This quote-unquote alliance seems to be around Microsoft's Azure cloud processing platform, which in reality probably doesn't have all that much to do with Xbox directly, you know? And you can hear this in the statement made by Sega in their press release.
Sega Corporation and Microsoft Corporation have agreed in principle a strategic alliance that explores ways for Sega to produce large-scale global games in a next-generation development environment built on Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. The alliance would form a key part of Sega's mid to long-term strategy, allowing the business to move forward with Supergame, a new initiative for developing new and innovative titles where the key focuses are global, online, community, and IP utilization.
Yeah, so you'll notice that not once was Xbox mentioned, and in fact, in the whole press release, Xbox is not mentioned once, because actually I don't think Xbox have anything to do with this. To me, this is much more like the Sony/Microsoft quote-unquote alliance from back in May 2019, in which Sony and Microsoft agreed to collaborate on quote-unquote cloud-based solutions for gaming experiences and content streaming, among other things, which was obviously much wider reaching for Sony. I guess the distinction here is that Sega will obviously be using Azure solely for video games. I know that there have been rumours for a while that Xbox might be making another Bethesda-esque purchase, and I know that Sega have been one of the main rumoured purchases as well. And honestly, I think that it would make a whole lot of sense for Xbox to make that purchase, but I do not think that this, again, quote-unquote alliance makes a Sega purchase any more or less likely, to be completely honest with you. I think it's a totally different thing entirely.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, to be honest. This feels like a much higher level strategic partnership. I mean, that's even the language that they're using around this. This isn't your typical games-focused press announcement that is essentially saying we're partner up, we're going to be on Game Pass, Xbox are buying us. You know, that's a close development relationship or a publishing relationship. This is a much higher level than that, and it does seem to be focused around the technology. We heard about this Supergame thing from Sega a couple of months ago.
Yeah, we did.
Which, you know, is essentially, I think, some kind of like cloud-based, streaming-based game development future that Sega sees for itself. And that's great, you know, and if Microsoft and Azure can help them do that in the same way that Microsoft and Azure seem to be helping a lot of different companies achieve their streaming goals at the moment, or potentially...
Including Sony.
Exactly, potentially achieve their streaming goals. I think that's what Sega's doing here. I think this is probably good overall, right? It's a way for Sega to kind of make itself relevant again in a certain sense. Not that it's irrelevant, they've got really good games out there, but you know, it's not the beast that it was 30 years ago. And maybe if they are kind of getting ahead of the streaming future a bit, making the right partnerships to get ahead of the streaming future, they could be positioning themselves as a much more kind of important player once again in the gaming sphere.
Yeah, I guess that statement to me is basically speaking to the fact that they want to get like a service game going.
Yeah.
It sounds like, which is something that they don't really have just now, you know. And whenever this Super Game Initiative or whatever games come out of the Super Game Initiative eventually release, like, I would be very surprised if they weren't multi-platform games, you know what I mean? It might be like a Yakuza situation where they come to Games Pass first and then come to like PlayStation and onto PC and then even potentially Switch down the line. But that would be a separate deal to be worked out on top of this. Like, I don't think that is necessarily reflective of that being any more or less likely. As you said, I think that this is much more higher level than, what console are these games going to release on? It's like, how are these games going to get fucking made is the problem right now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I just don't think that this has any bearing on any of that stuff. Now, that's not me saying that I don't think Sega will be purchased by Xbox, because again, to be honest, I think that makes a lot of sense. Or that I don't think that these games will come exclusively to Games Pass and Xbox, because again, the relationship between Sega and Microsoft seems to be really good right now, and maybe that is on the cards. However, I don't think that this actually makes any difference to either of those things.
Yeah, it's a separate thing. I guess maybe what we've seen is that Microsoft and Sega at different levels are working well together on other things, and that might have been the genesis of this in some way, or helped influence, who met who and got in the right room to create this kind of situation. But I totally agree with you. I don't think this means that even if those things that you're describing come to pass, I don't think this means that, if you know what I mean, those things will happen because they make sense to happen anyway.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly that. Alright, let's news item number 3. Ubisoft have announced plans to create its own blockchain games to enable players to play to earn in-game non-fungible tokens. Sorry, I'm struggling to even get through the headline without feeling vaguely sick. This was mentioned several times during their Q2 earnings call and in the earnings release. This has kind of gone under the radar a little bit, I have to say, but Ubisoft have actually been looking into this for a while. They were a founding member of something called the Blockchain Game Alliance and have been exploring the technology since its early development. They have also funded Animoca Brands, a gaming company that already uses blockchain to let you, quote-unquote, the biggest air quote-unquotes you can possibly imagine, own in-game NFTs. Ubisoft's CEO Frederic Duguay specifically called blockchain games a revolution during the calls, and CEO Yves Guillemot had this to say on the call.
Blockchain will imply more play to earn that will enable more players to actually earn content, own content, and we think it's going to grow the industry quite a lot. We've been working with lots of small companies going on blockchain, and we're starting to have a good know-how on how it can impact the industry, and we want to be one of the key players here.
Lewis, I don't know, do you think that there's some sort of bet out there in the games industry, among specifically Ubisoft, EA and Activision, to see who can be the biggest scumbags? The race to the bottom between those three right now seems to be unbelievable. I mean, even at a glance, right, this sounds grubby as hell, right? Play to earn. Think of what those words mean. That's what they want to call this. They chose that title. At least free to play sounds good. It's not, but it sounds good. Play to earn sounds like a fucking job. Oh man, I cannot get my head around this at all. If Ubisoft are seeing blockchain and non-fungible tokens as a future way to monetize games, I think that they very quickly have to be told absolutely no and to fuck off, because that would be so bad for many, many reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember back at the start of 2020 when ourselves and other podcasts, any podcast you listen to, all vaguely started to mention the pandemic? Week by week, the pandemic got mentioned more and more, and then it hit us all, and then life changed forever. This, to me, feels like a moment that we will look back on and think, oh, we started to talk about blockchain gaming in a serious way around this time, because it has exploded recently. NFTs and this idea of the blockchain coming to gaming has been talked about massively just in the last week or two alone. And Ubisoft here are obviously, as you say, joining the race to the bottom. What this represents to me is technology and finance moving the industry more than creativity or art. And
oh fuck man, I'd agree. That is beautifully put. That is exactly what's happening.
That happens a lot at times. Our previous story about Supergame, about cloud-based gaming and streaming games and stuff like that, that technology changes things, but generally it goes in tandem with a creative vision for how the technology and potentially the finance model can actually make a more interesting game or a product, no matter kind of what field you're in. But this stuff is just a grift. It is plain and simple a way to make money. Ubisoft have just seen a new revenue stream, and we know, forget about all the other stuff that's going wrong at Ubisoft just now, all the other bullshit stuff that they're involved in around sexual discrimination and all that,
which is still very much ongoing, ladies and
gentlemen. Very much is. So, count that into your factors on who's the worst of that trio that you mentioned. But
who's got the most sexual assault cases? not that we're making light of that, but no, Jesus Christ, that's what it's fucking come to.
And this, if you don't know much about the blockchain, I mean, not that the blockchain's necessarily the worst part of it, but NFTs and all of this stuff, it's, apart from anything else happening right now, it is absolutely killing the environment, this stuff. And it is a terrible,
oh my God, Liz, I'm so fucking
thing.
glad you brought this up. I'm so glad that you brought this up. Right now in Glasgow, COP26 is happening right now as we're recording this. Climate has never been more at the forefront of our politics. And Ubisoft have just announced the most environmentally unfriendly way to make money, which is through blockchain. The environmental impact of blockchain is absolutely horrific. And I think it said in the article I'm referencing, which is an IGN article by Rebecca Valentine, that they sort of mentioned that, we'll have to evaluate the environmental impact of this, and we're still in the very early stages of development and blah, 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 blah. But it's not going to fucking matter, because what they're going to see is, we can make this amount of money, so who gives a fuck about the environment is what it's going to come down to, because they don't care. Like, they don't care about the employees, so they certainly don't care about people in other countries that are going to be suffering because of climate change.
Absolutely.
They don't give a fuck, and they've just found another way to make money from their games, and they don't care about the ramifications of that as long as they're meeting their bottom line and they're keeping their shareholders fucking happy. And it is so sad, and I'm so glad that article pointed that out as well. And as well, she links to 2 other articles, one from The Verge and one from GamesIndustry.biz, that sort of try to explain non-fungible tokens and blockchain in general. And I would highly recommend that anyone go and read all 3 of those articles, because I think they're fantastic, and we will link to all of them over in the show notes at PlayersToo.com. But Liz, I'm so happy you brought that up, because it's horrendous.
Yeah, it's really terrible.
Very bad indeed.
One of those articles mentioned that Bitcoin alone, which isn't even the only blockchain currency
thing,
whatever we're calling it.
Again, because I struggle to talk about this because I simply don't understand a lot of it. You know what I mean? But yes, it's not even the only one, but Bitcoin alone is horrendous.
Bitcoin alone uses the same amount of energy as the entire country of Argentina. All of its people, all of its industries. It's a country of 45 million people. So, that is crazy. We are doubling our environmental impact here. We're doubling our energy use. It's crazy stuff. And again, there's no justification, and there would never be any justification for the harm to the environment. But even if you could completely remove that or offset it in a way that actually meant anything, and that is how they'll get around it. They will say that they'll carbon offset it, which is also deeply problematic. But
yes, I think the term greenwashing has now been banned around.
Exactly.
To be honest with you, we're getting too deep into the politics here. Let's continue with the video games.
But removing any of that stuff, I've yet to hear it from any of these people that are advocating blockchain entering the gaming space, how it will actually improve gaming. Even this quote about you can earn and own content. Earn and own content, like what? Like, so I get to quote unquote own a costume in a game? Well, I already basically own loads of costumes in games. I can buy costumes in games. I can buy characters in games. How do I own that in any greater degree? I can't take it. I can't take a character from Mortal Kombat and insert them into Grand Theft Auto. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a load of nonsense as far as I'm concerned, and it really it needs to be challenged, and people need to educate themselves about it, because it is booming at the moment. I've seen so many companies, football clubs, everything announce this stuff, and it really is getting to a point where it's tipping into the mainstream, and not enough people actually understand what that means.
Yeah, man, I think that you've said that brilliantly there, man. I think that people need to educate themselves on this stuff, because it is real bad, and it could get real bad very soon. And as you said, I don't think that owning a non-fungible token for a costume is significantly different in any capacity, in any real-life capacity, than me having won that through gameplay in some capacity, or even got it in a loot box or whatever. Like, there's no real difference there to the player, but to them, they could make a lot more money from it, and that's all they care about.
That's it, yeah.
Anyway, Lewis, moving on from that pile of shit to a slightly more cheery news item. Amy Hennig, now at Skydance New Media, has announced that they are working on a new Marvel game, which is very, very exciting, or at least exciting to me. If you don't know who Amy Hennig is, or why you should be excited about this, Amy Hennig was the creative director and writer of the Uncharted games at Naughty Dog, and before that she worked on the Soul Reaver games at Crystal Dynamics, if anyone remembers them. Really, really good back in the day, I have to say. Then she ended up working with Visceral Games on EA's Project Ragtag, which was supposed to be an EA Star Wars game, much in the vein of Uncharted, but that ended up getting canned, and Visceral ended up getting shut down, and that was a whole horrible, messy situation. So she has very good credentials, is what I'm trying to say, basically. Is widely respected in the industry and is very much top of the field, although she hasn't actually released a game as a creative director since Uncharted 3 back in 2011, which seems absolutely crazy. However, Amy Hennig and Jay Ong, the head of Marvel Games, have said this with regards to the announcement.
So Amy Hennig said, "I can't imagine a better partner than Marvel for our first game. The Marvel Universe epitomises all the action, mystery and thrills of the pulp adventure genre that I adore, and lends itself perfectly to an interactive experience. It's an honour to be able to tell an original story with all the humanity, complexity and humour that makes Marvel characters so enduring, and to enable our players to embody these heroes that they love." And then Jay Ong added, Amy has been setting the bar for narrative adventure games for decades, and we are happy to be collaborating with the talented and experienced new media team at Skydance. Their ambition and vision for making innovative entertainment using beloved Marvel IP was obvious from our first meeting.
And I think you can tell just how well respected she is, because I think that there is absolutely no way you land a Marvel franchise as basically your first major game without that kind of respect, you know? Now, I'm not even saying that this game is going to be like a massive AAA thing, although fingers crossed that it is, because that is very much Amy Hennig's background. But man, I think this is exciting. Like, I'm excited about this. I think that this is a good game developer, someone who knows how to make excellent video games, that has got a hold of, hopefully, a very good Marvel IP, and that is something that could be very exciting in the future. I genuinely don't know what your thoughts are on this list.
I think it is exciting. I totally agree that Amy Hennig is one of these figures in the industry who deserves a lot of the credit and acclaim that she gets, and it's not necessarily easy to say that about someone who hasn't actually shipped a game in 10 years. You know, it's some people are trading off reputation, and then there are some people who have actually established that reputation, and if you look into the history of the last 10 years of Amy Hennig's career, it has basically not really been her fault that these games that she's been working on.
None of it's been her fault. In fact, I'm looking at you, fucking EA. It was definitely your fault. EA.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, EA.
There's a lot of mitigating circumstances there, and I think that this is exciting. You know, like you say, that not only has she landed, or has Skydance landed, a Marvel franchise for their first game, but the assumption has to be that it is going to be almost certainly a third-person action-adventure game. And so, because you could land a Marvel game as your first game if you're doing a card game, you know, a deck builder or something like that, potentially, you know, if you're using the franchise in certain ways. But if you're doing a narrative-driven adventure game, like, you have to nail that, because Marvel are going to expect you to nail it. Look at the other games like that they've put out.
Yeah, Disney are very much everything's canon, so it has to be good.
Exactly, yeah. It's got to meet up to the brand expectations, and when it doesn't, you know, you'll hear about it. So my one concern about this, very slightly, is that, and it's not actually about Amy Hennig or Skydance or any of that, it's just that Marvel are replicating what they did in cinema now in games. We mentioned this at one of the previous showcases when the Marvel's Wolverine game got announced, that alongside Spider-Man 2 being kind of shown off, there was already, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy was coming, and Marvel's Midnight Suns was coming, and we've just come off the back of Marvel's Avengers. You know, and there are already other existing games in that universe. It just feels a little bit like everyone's going to get their Marvel property, and you know, that's okay, and there's a lot of fans for that stuff out there, but I just don't want us to get to the point where like every month there's a Marvel game, because there will be burnout there, and it also stifles a bit of that narrative creativity that you can have, because you do have this big other company telling you what you're allowed to do and how you're allowed to represent characters. So I really hope, I mean, I'm certain that if this game ships, Amy Hennig will kill it and will tell a really interesting story. Who knows what character she's going to get to play with? I've not seen any rumours really even about that.
No, me neither. To be honest with you, I was looking for rumours, which is a weird thing, because I don't usually go out of my way to look for rumours, but I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if there's like any speculation about what Marvel franchise this was going to be, and there was just nothing.
No.
So it'll be very interesting to see what it turns out to be, yeah.
But I think, you know, I'm sure it'll be great regardless, but let's just hope that Marvel slow down very slightly in terms of their takeover of the gaming space.
Don't get me wrong, like, I think that what Marvel's doing is actually quite good, considering how much of the IP that they have, that they're spreading it around, and they've not went down what happened with Star Wars,
exactly,
and just EA for decades. You know, I think this is definitely better, but I think that you'll probably be on a pretty short leash with Disney, e.g. I don't think that Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics will be getting another Marvel franchise anytime soon, because of how badly the Avengers went, for example, you know. So it's not necessarily to say that these IP won't be up for grabs again, you know what I mean? We just need to see how it all pans out, I suppose. Definitely, but I understand your concern. Alright, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, free games, Lewis. First podcast of the month, and that means free games. On PlayStation Plus, you are getting First Class Trouble, the game that we just mentioned in the PlayStation Showcase, Knockout City, and Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, which I believe is the remake. You're also getting The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, which was actually Skydance's other major game that they released, but that's coming to PSVR. The Persistence, which is coming to PSVR, and Until You Fall, which is coming to PSVR, which is interesting that 3 PSVR games are coming to PlayStation Plus this month. I think that that's actually very good because very soon, hopefully, we'll be getting an announcement of what's happening with PSVR 2, and it would be good for people who are buying that to already have just a staple of games ready to go. And I think that's actually something that you'd previously said, Lewis, about PlayStation Plus and why they've started including these PSVR titles. So make sure you claim them even if you don't currently have a PSVR headset as well.
Definitely, yeah.
And on Xbox Games Pass, you have GTA San Andreas, It Takes Two, a fantastic co-op game that me and Lewis have both played. You should definitely jump on that, Xbox fans. Forza Horizon 5, which actually comes out next week, and then that'll be a day one release. Kill It With Fire, Unpacking, which me and Liz were just talking before we started recording. Seems to be reviewing really well, that game.
Yeah.
For something that I thought was just a sort of throwaway little indie title. Football Manager 2022, One Step from Eden, and Minecraft is also coming to PC, although it does feel a bit as though if you wanted to play Minecraft on PC by this point, you've probably already got it, but
True.
there it is. Alright, let's shout out number 2. Speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy has come out this week. It's currently sitting with an 81 on PS5, an 83 on Series X, and a 77 on PC. And from what I can tell, the game actually seems to be pretty good. And I think that is pretty positive as well, because I could really have seen this game going entirely in the other direction and being another Marvel's Avengers, let's be honest. I pay almost no attention as well to user review scores, I have to admit, and I really don't think many people should pay much attention to user review scores. But I take notice when it is higher than the critic review scores. And in this case, it's like mid to high 8s, so it does seem as though people are enjoying this game, which is great.
Yeah, a bit of a surprise this. It felt like a game that could definitely have bombed. I think that when we reacted to the trailer, we were kind of like, oh, could be good, could be bad. Who quite knows what this is going to turn out to be? But it sounds like fans, both of Guardians of the Galaxy and Marvel stuff generally, and also fans of this style of gameplay are quite into it. Like, I've seen a lot of really positive stuff about it, so great for them. I'm not sure it's for me. I think if I'm going to play a game like this, I'm going to play Mass Effect first, and I think there's some overlap there. But if this is up your street, or if you're a Guardians fan, or if you've got kids who are Guardians fans, whatever, this probably is going to hit the spot.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I can see a lot of kids being very happy playing this game. Alright, shout out number 3. Riders Republic has also come out this week. This was Ubisoft's open world extreme sports game. It's currently sitting with a 79 on PS5, an 81 on Series X, and a 72 on PC. Basically, the game seems to be fine, but I'm sure Ubisoft were looking for a lot better than fine from this game. The game seems to suffer from the usual Ubisoft bloat and microtransactions, but at its core, to be fair to it, it does seem to be pretty fun. Again, this is one of those situations where you have user review scores that are higher than the critic review scores, so at least some people are enjoying this game. And I say some people because there does seem to be very little traction around this game. Like, I don't really feel as if a lot of people are talking about it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like it sort of crept up a little bit, and now it's here, and there isn't a lot of buzz around it. But the moment-to-moment gameplay is the key thing, and if people are enjoying that, and it sounds like some people are, at least the few people who are playing it are enjoying it. I've seen some really nice, cool, fun-looking footage on Twitter and on Reddit and stuff like that. So, you know, if you're interested in extreme sports games, if you're missing your old SSX, or even for our generation, Mark, Cool Borders, or any of those,
man. Yeah,
any of those types of games, it might be worth jumping into. I would definitely suggest people take a look at it. At least there's a cool wingsuit I've seen a lot of footage of on Twitter that looks like a blast to fly around, and better than the Anthem flying mechanics were.
Man, honestly not thought about Cool Borders in about 15 years. Alright, let's shout out number 4. Mario Party Superstars has also come out this week. It's currently sitting with a 79 on Switch, making it apparently the highest rating in the series since the original N64 game. Now, don't quote me on that, because I'm sure that I read that somewhere, then couldn't find the quote again, but it's high for the series. We'll just leave it at that. Basically, the game sort of is what it is. I think it plays pretty hard on a lot of people's nostalgia. It's a good party game, you know what I mean? That is what it's trying to be. I think that the main complaint around it is that there doesn't actually seem to be like a huge amount of content, and that I think a lot of people are maybe waiting for further content down the line. But ultimately, I think it is basically what it says on the tin. Again, unbelievably, Lewis, for the third time in a row, the user reviews are higher than the critics' reviews for this game. So again, it seems as though the people who have bought it are enjoying it, and that's good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the old Nintendo nostalgia machine in action, right? If you played these boards before on any of the older games, you're going to love this, I'm sure. I don't really get it, but there you go.
No, not for me and Lewis, I don't think, but it's out there and you're enjoying it. You have fun. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our play-along of Little Nightmares and Little Nightmares 2, because this is technically sort of our Halloween episode, question mark. I mean, if we had one, this is probably it, right? Little Nightmares and Little Nightmares 2 are both by Swedish studio Tarsier, who had previously worked on Little Big Planet, and from the movement in the game, I think that is clear immediately. The first game, you follow a girl called Six, and in the second game, you follow a boy called Mono, who encounters Six. Both games are spooky 2.5D platformers, and I think that it is safe to say that both games have taken inspiration from Limbo and Inside, and have definitely from that school of indie games, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. They follow that mould pretty closely. They both did come out after both Limbo and Inside were released, so you can see the influences there. But, you know, they definitely stand on their own feet as games as well.
Oh,
like
totally.
Different type of setting in that definitely. As well.
I also think, Lewis, it's safe to say that we both enjoyed these games. I really enjoyed them. I would happily play a Little Nightmares 3 if and when it comes out, although we can maybe talk about how that's a little bit on the fence now. But if a third game in this series came out, I would happily go and play it. However, I think it's also safe to say that we had non-insignificant gripes with the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely, we did. Yeah, just to echo what you said there, Mark, I mean, I really enjoyed elements of these games. I thought they were fantastic in a lot of different ways and, you know, strong in other senses, but there were some pretty significant gameplay issues in particular. For me, more notably in the second game, actually, but I think that you feel more strongly about the first game, possibly, which is interesting in and of itself to me.
I do, but I sort of agree why you found the second game problematic as well. So let's just get into this. We're going to start with the negatives here, but we're going to come on to the positives, and I want the overarching theme of this to be Mark and Lewis really like these games and they would recommend you go and play them. However, there are gripes. First of all, Lewis, the button layout. Good God, it is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. I feel like it's a button layout from 2001 or something like that. It is absolutely ridiculous. And it's so bad to the point that it makes the game feel clumsy at points, because the button layout is clumsy, and I think that a lot of that could have been fixed just by having a better button layout. And to use the PlayStation buttons, just to go off of here, 90% of what you're doing, ladies and gentlemen, is running with square and then jumping with X, which means that you are using the tip of your thumb to hold down square to run, then the pad of your thumb has to like squeeze down to X to make you jump. It's just a very uncomfortable button layout, as well as then holding R2 on the same hand to like grip things or to drag things along with you, or to like jump onto ladders away from things, or like jump onto ledges that are above you to pull yourself up or something like that. It just feels like a very unnecessarily clumsy button layout, which I really thought hampered the gameplay. Like, it was noticeably bad. I would never normally comment on a button layout, and if you're thinking, oh well, why didn't you just change it? You can't. I checked, you can't.
I think that is pertinent to mention, and maybe this is a naive comment because I don't know enough about development, but I just think that any game really should give you the option to remap the buttons to some extent, at least have some different presets or something, because like you say...
But as well, they basically had to deal with 3 inputs. They had to deal with run, jump and grab, and it's terrible. It's a terrible button layout.
Yeah, it definitely is, and considering how often you're having to do all 3 of those things simultaneously, you know, you're running to meet a gap that you have to jump, and at the other side of that gap you have to catch a ledge, so you're effectively holding all of those buttons at once. It's uncomfortable. Like you say, it does make for clumsy play. I found actually the catching of ledges and stuff with the R2 to be the thing that would quite often trip you up, you know, and you would end up releasing X for jump slightly too early to meet your R2 press, and then your jump would fall short, and then you would drop into the chasm and you'd have to start again. I don't comment on button layouts much either, but it was really annoying in the first game for me. We talked off air when we both played the first game, and you found it a bit more annoying than I did, I think. I assumed it would be fixed in the second game, and it was not.
It was exactly the fucking same.
Because of the added layers of complexity in the second game, some parts of which are really great, and we'll come on to that. But, you know, they added new mechanics and they added some more depth to the whole game for the second one, but it actually made some of the control even more frustrating, because in certain ways you had to be more precise than you did in the first game, and it demanded slightly more of you, and because of how that layout worked, it just didn't work. It just was really problematic.
I do have to say as well, like you mentioned the word precise there, and being precise in games like isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you have to have tight, accurate controls if you are going to make us do something that is very precise. Like I'm thinking of like a Celeste style platformer. Like you need tight fucking controls for that game, because you're asking us to make tight moves, do you know what I mean, that have very small margins for error, whereas the control style of Little Nightmares is way more loose, and if they ask you to do precision things again and again and again and again a lot in a row, the chances of you fucking it up are exponentially higher, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That, I mean, it feels quite floaty at times when you're playing. The running and the jumping and stuff are quite floaty, and what that leads to, just as an example of a typical thing that happens a lot in both games, there'll be chase sequences where one boss character or a lot of kind of chasing characters will be after you, and you might have to do something really simple within that run, like get through a doorway, but because of the perspective and because of the floatiness of the controls, you might think that you're lined up with the gap in that doorway, and you brush against the wall next to it or the door frame, and you get caught. And then and the other really frustrating thing, again, particularly in the first game for me, was the checkpointing, which sometimes would make you replay quite a lot of a section that you kind of already got through because of one stupid error right at the end, or one, as I say, annoying thing like getting caught on the environment slightly, which allowed a character to catch up with you. For me, the first game was worse because I was playing that on PC, whereas the second game I played the PS5 version, so the load times were faster. But my god, how frustrating I could find that at times, to think like, I know how to beat this puzzle, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, but just I've missed a jump because of these daft controls, and now I'm having to redo all of that again.
Yeah, I must admit, I played both games on PS5, so load times were not so much of an issue, but that was still annoying. To be honest with you, that is sort of my gripe with 3D platformers in general, is that the perspective often is a problem, and when a platformer specifically is asking you to make quite precise jumps here and there, it is problematic. It can be problematic, I will say that. Another thing that I found frustrating from a controls perspective from the second game, and I think it is your bigger gripe with the second game, and that was the sort of introduction of combat.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, in the first game you're effectively defenseless. It is very much a stealth game, and you're just trying to avoid detection most of the time and outrun things. But the second game, I guess because Mono is slightly bigger or something, or maybe they're just more ambitious in their development, he can pick up some objects. So you can pick up like an axe quite frequently, a lead pipe, planks of wood, stuff like that, to defend yourself.
It's worth pointing out, narratively, these characters are very small, so those things are very big and heavy to them.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's something that we should say. Like the characters are obviously children, but it's set in a really kind of twisted fantasy kind of fairy tale world where everything is enormous around them.
Yeah, they are children and the world is enormous.
Yeah.
So it's like they're double small.
Yeah, and so Mono will quite often be dragging these objects behind them, and just has this one move. It's, again, you're holding R2 to hold the object, and you're hitting X to swing it, and it's just a kind of overhead swing down onto the ground.
Quite deliberately slow, so you have to time it.
Yeah, exactly. But my god, how bad some of those sections were. There are two sections in particular in the game that really frustrated me. One in essentially the second area, which is kind of like a school full of these bizarre other children, these kind of bully characters who chase you and try and push you around and stuff like that. And later on as well, in a hospital section, these kind of little moving hands, these disembodied hands that chase you around, sort of like spiders basically, and you have to time your swings as they approach you, and both types of enemy essentially will approach you and stop and then leap at you, and it's one hit kills. You can't do anything else to stop them. I just thought it was terrible, Mark. I mean, I rarely say that when we play these play-along games, and you give a lot of leeway to indie developers often, but I found particularly that section in the school to be really terribly done. Lining up your swings was bad. The timing on the swings and on their leaps towards you was bad and hard to read. The checkpointing meant, again, that you could kill all but one of the enemies in that whole zone, and then you would fuck up your swing on the last one, and you'd have to do it all again, and you'd be frustrated all over again. I have rarely been so frustrated in a game that I then say that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I would say that is largely how I felt about it as well. Like, it was very, 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 very frustrating, some of those sections. It really, really was. But yeah, I would agree. Again, I want everyone to remember, we both like these games, both of them. But the second one where they introduced the combat, like, it wasn't bad enough that it detracted from the whole game. Mm-hmm. But I mean, those sections were pretty rough, I would say.
Yeah, I'm glad there wasn't more of them. That's how I feel about it.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. Another thing that I just wanted to say is that the level design here, I actually thought that the level design by and large was pretty good until it wasn't. By which I mean that I liked a lot of the level design, like a lot of the level design is really, really good, but every now and again, and it happened in both games, multiple times in both games, where I'd walk into a room and walk into an area and just be like, I have absolutely no idea what to do or where to go, which I also find frustrating because it led to a lot of like faffing around, being like, there should just be something here that's obvious for me to do. And to be clear, like, I'm not talking about like little puzzle sections, which some of them took a wee moment to figure out. You know what I mean? They weren't all like dead straightforward or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like literally, oh, there was this random piece of furniture that you had to climb up. That was just like, well, how would I have known to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was nothing indicative in the level design, so that was a sort of minor gripe on top of everything else, I suppose. But again, by and large, I just do want to say that we both like this game. We both like both these games, sorry. I keep on saying this game. We're talking about two games here, but they are both so linked by their narrative as well.
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
I'm sort of feel glad actually in the end that we've ended up doing these both at the same time, because it's almost impossible to speak about one without speaking about the other, now in my head anyway. But have you got any more gripes, Lewis, or can we move on to some of the more
Let's get on to the
things?
Positives, yeah, because there's obviously
so many
other little
positive
niggly things, but yeah, there's a lot of good things to say about these games, so let's go on.
There
to
really
that.
is, and I think a lot of it revolves around the art style and the atmosphere created around these two games, both of which were absolutely fucking brilliant. Like, I thought that the world that they created there was like completely unsettling. I thought that the art style really, really reflected that. Everything was like dirty and brown and nothing was perfect and everything was a mess. But the level of like detail in the world for an indie game, for any game of this scale, to be honest with you, absolutely blew me away. Like, these two games looked fantastic. I was genuinely blown away by how good they looked. I felt as though in every room, every wall, and every corner, you could look and find something interesting that was like designed. Do you know what I mean? Everything was put there by a developer. It wasn't just like a room you just walked in and it was just a square uninteresting room. Like, everything felt as though it had purpose and thought put into it, you know. And specifically, I think that the character designs, not necessarily of Six and Mono, although they're pretty good as well, but like the bosses, like the baddies, like a lot of them just felt like gross and were very unsettling in the way that they moved and things like that. I really thought that the style, the art design, the art direction, everything in that capacity was just fantastic. I really thought it was really very good. I've not been drawn in by an art style in quite a long time the way that I was drawn in by that one, but I just thought for the game that it's trying to be, they have fucking knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I mean, it's the key thing to these games and to this series, I suppose, because otherwise, in a lot of ways, it would just kind of be like a reskinned Limbo or Inside. But what they've done here is that they have made an entire world, and you do get that sense across the two games that there's something much bigger happening here than you ever kind of get told to you directly through the gameplay. But it's a grotesque kind of fairy tale vibe to it. Everything, like you say, everything is gargantuan. Particularly in the first game, everything is really kind of fat and hulking and sweaty and messy, and like that ties into sort of some of the thematics behind particularly the narrative of the first game. But the second game continues that absolutely. It's you know, the title Little Nightmares is a bit twee maybe, but everything does feel nightmarish. Everything feels that way, that, you know, you see something in a nightmare and it is ballooned beyond its regular proportions and it judders and halts and stutters towards you and it comes suddenly screeching. You know, the way that some of the movement is with the enemies, the way that they'll chase you, or the teacher in the second game who suddenly has this like serpentine neck, who she'll just crane her way into the rooms that you're in and be like peering under tables and stuff like that. A question that some people might have about a game like this or games like these, are they scary? And they're not really full of jump scares or anything like that, but what they
and
are,
I'm so glad about that. I just despise the jump scare, but
yeah,
they are unsettling and they are creepy. They are not scary.
Yeah, exactly. Like these games, it's all about that atmosphere. You're constantly have a sense of unease and you're never frightened, but you're always a bit like, God, this is a bit bleak, isn't it? It's really dark. Everything's just on top of me. It's claustrophobic. I mean, the perspective and the style does that as well. But yes, I think particularly like real shout out to whoever did the enemy designs and particularly the boss designs. not just how they behave, but how they look. You know, they're pretty much all fairly iconic villain looks, I think now. You know, the Doctor in the second game was really stuck in my mind yesterday, who's like this kind of maggot creature crawling around on the ceiling. And
yeah, man. Oh god,
every single one of them has this. I mean, the very first boss you encounter in the first game is this kind of blinded guy with really long arms who just like constantly reaching around. Yeah, it's just everything. Every single one of them has something really interesting going on, and they're all kind of spooky and unsettling in their own way. And hats off to the team for producing this entire world.
Yeah, I have to say that is what draws you in. That to me is what made this game, as you said, was that art design, that world creation, all of that. Like, again, we said that it was unsettling and it was claustrophobic and all of that, but at the same time, like, if you're going in for a game like this, it's sort of that you want. Like, I don't want cheap jump scares. That's nothing. That, as I said, I find that really cheap in cinema and in games and in everything. Like, if that's what you like from games or whatever, that's fine, but like if you're doing like a real horror game, I don't really find that very interesting. Whereas this, I found this world like really incredibly interesting, despite the fact of how dark and whatever that they've made it. Just to touch on the story a little bit, I suppose, which I know that we are big on story and narrative in games. Like, I've very recently said that I value that almost above anything else in the game, to be honest. But when it comes to the story here, it's very much in the Hollow Knight vein, and that it is bigger than you get to see, as you said, Lewis, but also it's very much in the vein of show don't tell, which we also love very much here. And I don't think that there is a single line of dialogue spoken or written in either of these games, which is pretty interesting, you know. And despite that, you do get a sense of the story and what is going on and what these characters are going through. And I actually thought that was like really well done. I really did. And as I said, I'm very glad that we've done these two games together now, because they do intrinsically link with one another, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in case anyone isn't aware, the second game is effectively a prequel to the first game. But even within that, like, some of the things that happen in the second game kind of complicate that idea, even that there is a straightforward linear narrative from point A to point B. You know, there's something more odd going on in this universe, perhaps. But I totally agree with everything that you said there, Mark, as well, that it is a world that implies things to you, and everything happens through metaphor rather than through direct story. So you can never quite be sure of what it's getting at or exactly what's going on. I mean, there's no explanation at the end of the first game as to like where you have been or why you have been here. You just kind of wake up imprisoned in this place, and by the end you're breaking out of it. But like, who the fuck these people are or why they've imprisoned you or any of that stuff is kind of left up to you as the player and the internet community thereafter to like discuss and to think about and kind of pick apart what it is getting at. And the second game really carried that forward in, I thought, really interesting ways, all the while both games making points about society and about our culture that I think are, you know, worth exploring as you're playing it as well. That is the thing that I liked most about it. The puzzles could be really great and some of the action sequences were fantastic, but ultimately it was just being in that world and thinking like, I wonder why they made this villain like this, you know? What point are they trying to make here, you know? And that stuff I thought lended so much to this pair of games. I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, I have to say, like, playing the second game really did inform the first game for me as well, because you basically think that, or I thought anyway, that 6 was basically on a revenge quest in the first game, or that is what I thought anyway. And the way that the second game starts, which as we said is a prequel, is with Mono and Six meeting, and then it's sort of a companion-y thing throughout the game, although you do get separated on multiple occasions where you are just by yourself. But it's basically Mono and Six going through this world, and then by the end, Six ends up being kidnapped and is sort of kind of the last boss, I suppose you could say. But she's sort of distorted and is being brainwashed or whatever it is you want to say.
There's something going on, basically.
Yeah, but throughout the entire thing, like, you're helping one another throughout the whole thing. And I thought what the game was going to be at the end, and spoiler alert, I suppose, I thought what the game was going to be at the end was that Mono would be killed or taken, and that would be the reason for Six's revenge narrative later coming from the first game, basically. Yeah. But what actually happens is, and Lewis, I swear to God, this broke my goddamn heart.
Oh yeah, it's I think we should reiterate our spoiler warning, because it is like the final few minutes of the game I thought were pretty astonishing. Like, I kind of audibly gasped, which I don't often do in video games because you usually see it all
Lewis,
coming.
I shouted no at the TV. I could not fucking believe it. I absolutely could. It was gut-wrenching. It really, really was. So there's this mechanic throughout the game where basically you have to get Six to the other side of a large gap, and then you jump, and then she catches you and pulls you up. And that happens multiple times throughout the game. And right at the end, it looks as though you're being set up for that again. Basically, the two of you are running across this bridge. Six is ahead of you. The bridge begins to collapse, and Six turns round and puts her arm out, and you have to make this enormous jump to catch her. And I thought what was going to happen was that on that occasion you would miss and Mono would fall. What actually happens is that Six catches you and then lets you go. And I was like, you fucking bastard. Like, I was like, I absolutely could not goddamn believe it. And then that sort of like feeds into the whole weird time-space paradox thing happening in the second game, which we're not going to go into in a great detail, but it sort of feeds into that in a pretty interesting way as well, I think. But my God, that moment was, I mean, I will remember that for a long time, that moment.
Absolutely. I had exactly the same reaction. I was blown away by that moment. It took me a good few minutes to kind of pull myself together and think about why that might have happened. And I think that there are compelling story reasons why that might have happened.
But in that moment,
the power of that,
you felt like Mono in that moment. Like, I cannot believe this. And then she just walks away.
Exactly.
She just like drops you and then walks away.
And I think that it does help as well, having played the first game first, obviously, you do, by the end of that game, understand that Six is maybe a bit of a darker character than you might give her credit for. I mean, because you play this game mostly as a wee girl with a big yellow coat on, and you're being chased by these horrible big monsters. It's easy to kind of think of her as innocent victim, but by the end of the first game even, you're like, fuck, there's something not quite right with this kid.
I do have to say that the story endings, both of them, were really very good indeed. Like, really very good indeed. Like, this is what we're saying, like, all that griping about the mechanics and whatever, like, this brings it all back. Like,
exactly,
this totally makes it all worth it.
It is absolutely worth getting through the games for what is happening, and just to see all these different character designs and all the different elements in the world that they've built, it's definitely worth it.
Totally. I mean, I went through the second game again to platinum it. Like, it didn't annoy me that much that I wasn't unwilling to play it again. You know what I mean? I genuinely did, and I think that we can both say here that we would definitely recommend that you play both of these games, because again, they're both parts of the same whole. You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
it feels as though you can't not play one without the other now. Really, you can't, because they both feed into one another so brilliantly. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think we will have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you can take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could give us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. And now, Lewis, it is time to announce our new play-along game for November, and that will be Pyre by Supergiant Games. Now, we've already done Bastion and Transistor by Supergiant Games, and I think that we can both agree that they were fantastic, and Supergiant are an unbelievable developer for the indie scale, or any scale, frankly. But we do have to say as well that after this, for December, we will be going on to play Hades as well. So this has all been ramping up to that, basically, getting through the Supergiant back catalogue, if you will, to complete the quadrilogy and finish it on Hades, both of which I think we've been looking forward to playing for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Having played Bastion and Transistor, I'm super, super excited to play these. I think Pyre is maybe the one of the 4 of their games that is maybe the most critically sort of divisive, but I know a lot of people who really enjoy it as well. It's sort of an action RPG that has sports elements chucked in, and building towards Hades, which was a lot of people's game of the year last year. Really excited to get stuck into these.
Absolutely. Like, it almost feels as though Supergiant can't do very much wrong, so even if this one's a bit divisive, I reckon I know what side of that divide I'm going to be on, but hey, I guess we'll find out at the end of the month. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.